All right. Good morning, everybody. We'll try that one more time. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Wow. Okay. Everybody's awake on a Friday. Love it. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Nick Serrano. I proudly serve as the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Mayor of the City of San Diego, the Honorable Todd Gloria. And since October, I've had the honor of serving as the chair of the San Diego County Water Authority representing the City of San Diego. I was appointed to the Water Authority in May of 2021, elected as its vice chair in 2022, and was elected as chair just under a year ago. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to recognize some of my colleagues on the Water Authority Board of Directors. Many of them are scattered throughout this room. If you're a member of the Water Authority Board of Directors, will you please stand and be recognized? Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, as always, for your continued service and your commitment to the people of our region. And I also want to thank our co-hosts, the San Diego World Affairs Council and the Burnham Center for Community Advancement, for their engagement, their vision, and their partnership in helping bring this important dialogue forward. Colleagues, it's truly my honor to welcome you here today for this conversation about the future of the Colorado River. To begin, let me perhaps start with a reminder of some context, and maybe it's going to be a fun fact for some of you in this room. San Diego averages less than 10 inches of rainfall a year. That's less rainfall than Tucson, Arizona. Think about that for a second. Now I'll give you another one. Here in San Diego, we have not had enough local water to meet our regional demand since 1946. Yet today, San Diego is home to 3.3 million people. We're home to a $262 billion economy, an economy of groundbreaking discoveries and the production of high-value goods and services that change the way the world works. And how is that possible, you might ask yourself? The Colorado River. 61% of water here in San Diego comes from the Colorado River. Now, that said, right now, there's more at stake than ever when it comes to the river. We have growing demand, but shrinking supplies, and an ever volatile and changing climate. The river we've all depended on for generations is under unprecedented pressure. The impacts of these challenges are not abstract. They are alarming, and most of all, serve as a call to action. Because at the end of next year, the current management guidelines for the river will expire. And what that means is 7 states, multiple tribal nations, and Mexico must come together to write the next chapter of how this river, the lifeblood of the Southwest, will be shared. Stay tough. These negotiations will be among the most important of our generation. And as you will hear momentarily, will not be easy and have not been easy. But they can be successful, I believe, if we embrace the guiding principles of partnership and collaboration, acknowledging shared purpose and shared challenge. That's why I, as chair of the Water Authority, made it a top priority to end what I called the era of litigation with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. 15 years, if not more, of court battles that defined our relationship by conflicts, discord, and division. And we settled that litigation to choose partnership and collaboration because conflict is a luxury we in the Southwest cannot afford in this moment. And so that settlement, therefore, was not just about closing the book on the past and the endless fighting of yesterday's battles, but about opening the door to our future in which we move forward together again in shared purpose, challenge, and opportunity. This work, the decisions ahead, will shape not only our water future, but our economic future, our environmental future, and our ability to sustain our communities for generations to come. And that's why today's discussion is so important. Today's discussion with this esteemed panel of experts will provide critical context about the current high-stakes negotiation over how to share this limited resource and what our region is doing to prepare for the hotter, drier world we are all experiencing. Their perspectives from operations to diplomacy to tribal leadership will help share and provide greater understanding of the challenges, the complexities, and the opportunities in front of us. Now, in closing, let me just say this. This is truly an extraordinary and unprecedented time for so many reasons. But I believe if we choose partnership over parochialism, collaboration over conflict, if we see the challenge, but also find the opportunities that exist therein, then I believe history will look back on this moment as one where Southern California came together to help secure the future of the Colorado River, not just for ourselves, but for all those who depend on it. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for caring about this issue and lending your ear, your voice, and your mind to this conversation. This, again, would not be possible without the support of our co-hosts, the San Diego World Affairs Council and the Burnham Center. And it is my pleasure to now hand this over to Paul Martula, a board member from the San Diego World Affairs Council, who will provide us with a few words. Paul?
Good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, our president, David Edick, could not be here as planned. So I'm honored to welcome you on his behalf and on behalf of all the members of the San Diego World Affairs Council. I'm on the board of directors. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization founded in 1954, and we educate and engage San Diegans on global issues, including foreign policy, international relations, and cross-cultural opportunities and challenges. We're proud to host this Future of the Colorado River event together with the San Diego County Water Authority and the Burnham Center for Community Advancement. These sorts of inter-organizational collaborations serve to raise awareness and strengthen our community. The San Diego World Affairs Council is not new to this critical cross-border issue. 4 years ago, we hosted a webinar about ways to resolve the ever-declining Colorado River flows and simultaneously redress the immense environmental challenges of the Salton Sea. Freshwater scarcity is real and getting worse by the day. Earlier this week, I read an interesting article by McKinsey that provided me with a new and truly sobering perspective on the scale of this problem. I'd ask you to imagine a bubble that is 35 miles in diameter. So that's essentially from La Jolla to Alpine and from Chula Vista to Carlsbad and in equal height. 100% of the entire planet's surface fresh water, all the lakes, rivers, and streams would fit within that bubble. Bringing this back to today's more local topic, I know that everyone here is anxious to hear about what can be done collectively and individually to help save the Colorado. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tad Seth Parson, co-founder, president, and CEO of the Burnham Center for Community Advancement.
Good morning. My name is Tad Parson. Yeah, I guess you already heard that. I'm the president and CEO of the Burnham Center, and we're delighted to collaborate with our partners at the Water Authority, with the city, with the World Affairs Council, and the rest of you as community stakeholders in bringing important issues like this to light. There's maybe no more important issue. There are equally important issues, but there's no greater challenge that we face in our region than the issues surrounding water supply, clean water irrigation, and the general environmental sustainability of our region. So the Burnham Center is a think and do tank designed as a place for the community, that would be you, and everybody else involved, to come together, face the challenges that we see on the horizon or that we experience every day on the streets of San Diego and beyond, and then envision the future in those solutions and maximizing those opportunities that are right in front of us, that if we would just come together. And Nick, I want to thank you for the phrase partnership over parochialism. You're going to hear that in speeches I make for the next year, because that's what the Burnham Center is all about. Bringing stakeholders together across sectors, private sector, public sector, nonprofit, grassroots, all of us, because the way we're going to solve these problems is together. And that's the only way we're going to solve them, is together, is through this level of collaboration, this level of discussion, in not just in back rooms, but in front rooms with all of you. So we're all aware, we're all involved, we can all dig into the innovation that's required. So I do want to make a quick note of one of our founding board members who's in the room. Pete Ellsworth is here. And now I know Pete just flew in from Singapore last night, and he's here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. I don't think at my age I could do that. So Pete, that's dedication to our community right there. And so thank you for being here. One of my most trusted and respected friends and mentors over the last several decades. Speaking of the last several decades, I'd like to introduce somebody I've known for quite some time as a regional and international expert in the field of international water usage and supply. Carl Nettleton, who's to my left, your phone's off now, right? Okay, everybody's phone's off? Okay, good. Good. It's good for that to happen on the dais so that everybody gets the hint, right? So I know Carl founded a regional international ocean nonprofit that studies all these issues, and he's developed a level of expertise that is pretty much unsurpassed in the region. I know also, speaking of international travel, he just got back from the United Nations plastic treaty negotiations, and before that was in Bogota doing a workshop in ocean work in Ecuador. So that's a mouthful, and Carl has my deepest respect for the work that he's done on behalf of all of us in the region. And again, thank you for this deep collaboration that we have with all of you, with all of our governmental and non-governmental partners. And I look forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted, for that kind introduction, and for all the good work you do and the Burnham Center does on behalf of San Diegans and the issues that we're all trying to work with. And I want to thank the audience for your interest in the Colorado River and the issues we're facing today. This is a great turnout, and as Tad said, I've got a long history working in water and other environmental matters. I'm the president of Nettleton Strategies and the founder of Open Oceans Global, which is the organization that is doing the work internationally. We're going to begin with just a very brief overview of how we got to this point in the Colorado River, just to kind of give a framework for everybody to put the discussion in frame. Two housekeeping notes first. One, there are white cards here on the right on the table if you want to ask questions. As the morning goes on, you can hand those questions back to the volunteer, and they'll be brought to me at the Q&A time afterwards. And if you would like the program, there's a QR code on the screen. You can get that, and you'll see information about the speakers. So let's get started by just taking a look at some geography. Get the right here. This is the Colorado River Basin, the map. Many of you are going to be familiar with that. It's broken for regulatory purposes into two pieces: the upper basin and then the lower basin. That's you see the dark black line there that breaks them. The Glen Canyon Dam and Lake Powell. That's the point of intersection between the upper and lower basin, and just kind of give you an overview of the watersheds that are bringing water to San Diego and to much of the Southwest. I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the evolution of agreements and regulations that we have regarding the Colorado River, just so you might see how we got to this point in time. It started in 1922 with the Colorado River Compact, which created the upper and lower basins from a regulatory basis, and decided that the allocation for each basin should be 7.5 million acre feet, based on the best estimate of the time of how much water is available. Along the way, we had we authorized the Hoover Dam. We had the 7-party agreement, which California used to set its allocations. In 1944, the Mexican Water Treaty, which allocated 1.5 million acre feet to Mexico, making the total overall annual allocation 16.5 million acre feet. And many more there, but what you can see on the right, the Lake Mead level, and that's measured in feet above sea level. And then there are some criteria for when it gets to certain levels, it's a level of, of emergency, a second tier level of emergency. We won't go into those details right now, but what you want to take a look at is that, levels were pretty high come 1970, 1,153 feet. And for about 30 years, while there was variability in those 30 years, the level stayed the same. And it's 2003, it was still 1153. The area in orange, that's the area like around 2000, we went into this 22-year or more period of the driest period in the last 100 years. So you can see all of a sudden there's a flurry of activity trying to figure out how we balance water use, how we account for low water years and drought. And so you've got all this activity. And the last is the 2024 supplement to these interim guidelines that talked about, where do we conserve, how can we put extra water in Mead to keep the levels up. And that agreement's ending. So we're at a point now where we need a new agreements. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And this just so you can see how the demand and flow goes. You can see the red line is water use, the blue line is water supply. Right around 1990, you can see that one little dip down there. That was kind of our first warning sign. There was a significant period of drought right then, but it recovered. A couple of years later, it recovered. It jumped up again, but then since then, it has been steadily more demand than supply is available. Even though, as you see the red line going down, we are using less water. We still have that gap there. So 2025, 2026, this is a pivotal time in the history of decision-making about the Colorado River. I think this Cal Matters quote on August 15th, after the federal government released multiple scenarios for the next 2 years, the one experts say is most likely shows that one more dry year could send Lake Powell plunging below the levels needed to generate power by December 2026. That's a serious outcome that I'm sure we're all going to be working and talking about to try to avoid. So what are the kind of decisions that have to be made in the next year and a half? November 2025, the basin states have to come up with a consensus framework of what they think should happen. In December of 2025, there's an environmental impact statement that will be released in draft. It has 4 outcomes that are being analyzed. In February, the basin states have to submit their final proposal. And then in summer of 2026, we should have the final environmental statement and record of decision for the new guidelines. That's a decision. So that's where we are in history. And we're going to talk about where we're going. We're fortunate today to have a great panel that was put together by the World Affairs Council and the Water Authority. I'm going to introduce them in short, although there's good bios that could go forever for all of them. First on my left, Sally Spainer, who's the Foreign Affairs Officer for the International Boundary and Water Commission. Dan Denham, who's the General Manager of the San Diego County Water Authority. Tina Shields, so Water Department Manager for the Imperial Irrigation District. Jordan Joaquin is the member and past president of the Kushan Indian tribe for the Fort Yuma Indian Reservation. And last but not least is Carlos de la Parra, the founding partner of the Centro Lucan de Estrategias and Agua y Medio Ambiente in Tijuana, the Lucan Center for Water and Environmental Strategies. So with that, we're going to start off. The strategy we're going to do here is I'm going to ask all the panelists to answer 2 questions. I'm going to start off on a hopeful mode, and I have individual questions for them relative to each of their perspectives in the world, and then we'll see how the dialogue goes from there. So the first question I'm going to ask, and we want to kind of follow with Nick and Tad talking about, and Paul talking about collaboration and a hopeful note. And let's start off with Dan. From your perspective, what's the status of the negotiations, and what gives you hope that a new fair agreement can be reached?
Well, first, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Those friends and colleagues in the audience that know me best would probably characterize me as a glass half empty guy. So I'll try to be a little bit more positive today, because I do think that there is hope, Carl, and I think that hope comes from the sense of urgency that we all have to embrace. We've been talking about this deadline that we have at the end of the calendar year and then into the summer of 26 for arguably 20 years. We've been putting it off for a long time. And we put it off because these discussions are difficult. There's billions of dollars at stakes. There's economies in the West that are at stake. And we have to get it right. I think what gives me the most hope are two things. In the structure that we created through all of those agreements that you saw on the screen there, we built in options. We gave ourselves options knowing that this future was coming. So for instance, we have agreements with the Imperial Irrigation District that lasts for 75 years, agreements with the Department of the Interior that go for 110 years. Those aren't static agreements. Those are agreements that we know that we can maneuver within. But it's going to take a little bit of collaboration, and it's going to take collaboration, not just from the parties that are in those agreements and the water that's being conserved currently, but it's going to take this collaboration from a broader spectrum of folks. And I think that this panel, this makeup here, it demonstrates that. I think that this time around, we have to be more inclusive as to the perspectives that we bring to the table. The fact that we have this group here, I think is evidence of that. It's not just this group, it's the environmental community. It's people across the Southwest who I think understand that the time is now to fix the system and make things right for the West.
Thank you, Dan. Tina, from IID's perspective.
So I used to be a glass half full kind of gal, but it's only about a third full these days. And so I'm going to choose to be an optimist because from Imperial Irrigation District's perspective, we don't have another water supply. So unless we're going to pick up and move our entire community, we have to find ways to protect the river and to find collaborative results. I think I'm a little frustrated right now. The negotiations are ongoing. They're very extensive. We're meeting every couple of weeks. We have multiple phone calls. What I find hopeful in the negotiations is that the lower basin states have really come together and formed a pretty solid foundation as to how we expect to move forward and put things forward that will be challenging to implement, but that are necessary under the current framework. However, what I find challenging is working with the other part of the basin who is still trying to figure out what they're willing to do and moving past the mantra of they can't do anything because they don't have a reservoir that they divert from and they have a hydrologic shortage every year, because what we know how to do in IID is really hard things. We have a very significant water supply, but on a normal year, we conserve about 16% to send to San Diego and Coachella and Metropolitan and prop up that Southern California water supply resiliency. That collaboration gives us a really good foundation moving forward. And we have stepped up more recently to do additional conservation efforts to prop up Lake Mead. So far, we reached our highest level of conservation last year with about 24% of our water supply. We stacked up, I think, 4 to 8 feet in Lake Mead already in the last 2 years. We'll do another 3 or 4 feet of elevation to, again, protect those reservoir infrastructure elevations that are super critical. And this is a little bit of a mindset change for IID. In the past, we've sort of fought for our water rights to protect our community. We will always do that. Our North Star will always be our water users and the Salton Sea. But again, without the Colorado River, our community ceases to exist. So we're going to try to take those existing partnerships, build off them, and share them with Arizona and other states that have some really tough conservation activities ahead of them, because you shouldn't make the same mistakes twice. We've learned a lot. We've litigated a lot, but certainly the path forward, as Dan mentioned, is leveraging these partnerships long-term.
Thank you, Tina. Jordan, when we talked on the phone earlier, you were a very glass half full guy. So let's hear what your thoughts are.
Sure, thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me today and getting the tribal perspective of the water. And so the negotiations, they're at a stalemate. I am too. It's frustrated at times. And I think it's time that is now, because we need a living river. Not for just the tribes, not for the states, for municipalities, but without a living river, we will not be here today. So do I have hope? we have to have hope because, our children, our grandchildren rely on that. And so, like Tina said, the things that IAD has done, it may not have been done in upper states, but give us an opportunity to show you what we have done. And I think, my personal opinion, I think there's a lot of egos at the table. And let's put those egos aside because our community needs to come to a resolution, a viable, what's fair across the board. And, as I look up the map, I think if we're bringing that map up there, my reservations at the very southern tip of Southern California. Our reservation is largely in California, but we have reservation that goes into Yuma, Arizona as well. But when I became president and I would go to these water conferences, they would talk about the great sighting of the 1922. Where were the tribes at? Colorado River runs through the tribes, but we were never mentioned. We weren't even at the table. Now that tribes are at the table, we're just saying this is the tribal perspective. We are from the river. We were great hunters, great fishermen. We planted our own vegetables along the Colorado River. Back home, Colorado River through Yuma, Arizona was like a sea, very wide, like an ocean. Now it's just a small river. But what can we do? Got to be hopeful. Leave our egos at the door because our communities, our states, our people, everyone here in this room relies on a living river. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And given the history that you referred to, it's so refreshing to hear your positive outlook on that we have to do something and we'll do something. So I appreciate that a great deal. I know you don't represent Mexico, Carlos, but you certainly have some views and we'd love to hear your views on what makes you hopeful about the potential.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to all the organizers. And good morning, everybody. Before I start, I want to give a shout out to those that posted the signs for the room. This is about the future of the Colorado River, yet the sign said the politics of water, which was a very, the capacity for synthesis and candidness right there. What makes me hopeful? Well, strangely, paradoxically, the glass half full or the glass 1/3 full makes me hopeful. Mexico can work with a half, with a glass that's half empty. Think of the Colorado River as an old dam with widening cracks. And for years, the cracks were visible, but we kept going as a structure, thinking that it would hold forever. And now the cracks are spreading, and we're about to hit rock bottom if we haven't hit rock bottom already. And the dam cannot keep working the way it was. That's frightening, but it's also hopeful because cracks force us to innovate. And if there is anywhere in the Colorado River that I think that there are areas of opportunity, to use an euphemism, I think it's in Mexico. I think we have a lot to learn, and in that timeline that Carl showed, it's mostly focused on the US, but in 2012, there was minute 319. And in 2017, there was minute 323. And those two items within history, the history of the Colorado River, are really landmarks are on the Mexican side. Because prior to minute 319, 13 years ago, Mexico would see the Colorado River as just a faucet in the wall that would deliver 1.5 million acre feet of water year in, year out on a yearly basis. And it was governed by the 1944 treaty, and the International Boundary and Water Commission made sure that 1.5 million acre feet of water would be delivered to Mexico. And Mexico didn't have any reason to be concerned. But during minute 319, there was a, how do you say, pulling of the curtains. And we began to see how complex the Colorado River is. And in the process of doing that, the United States and Mexico opened up a seat for Mexico to be not just a user of water, but also to be in on policy discussions. And now, as we begin to see the complexity, we've learned a lot on how the Colorado River is managed on the US side of the border. And the areas of opportunity just continue to be something that, in a hopeful sense, will contribute to improving. There's so much that we can do on the Mexican side. And of course, one of the issues that is foremost in the minds of Mexicans is this vision of reconnecting the river to the sea. And we hope that that is also a side product of all the negotiations.
Thank you, Carlos. Sally has in the IBWC play a little different role than our other speakers on the panel, but she may have some messages of hope for us, maybe around the minutes that Carlos mentioned. But take it away, Sally.
Thank you, Carl. And yes, as Carlos alluded to, the agreement with Mexico takes the form of a minute. So the environmental impact statement and the record of decision that the Bureau of Reclamation, Department of the Interior are working on, those are purely domestic in nature. They're not binding on Mexico. Those only apply to the operations in the United States. The minute is the agreement by which Mexico would agree to take certain actions in alignment with what's happening in the United States. The International Boundary and Water Commission, United States and Mexico, is responsible for applying the boundary and water treaties between the two countries and settling differences in the application of those treaties. And minutes are considered implementing agreements of the 1944 Water Treaty. So we have actually not yet started our negotiations on the new minute. I think we've been delayed because we're waiting to have more certainty in terms of what the basin states are working on and the preferred alternative that reclamation will be identifying hopefully in the next couple of months here. However, Mexico is not in the dark about what's going on. We have been meeting with Mexico regularly. We've held meetings every couple of months, I would say, where reclamation comes. They brief Mexico on the alternatives that are being developed in the EIS and that entire process. We've received Mexico's input on modeling assumptions in the EIS that would be applicable to Mexico. So they're fully aware of what's going on in the United States. I think they're anxious to get the negotiations formally started. And we have our minutes 319 and 323 that Carlos mentioned deal with a lot more than just shortage and reductions. We have environmental agreements. We have agreements on salinity, on operational issues, on water conservation investment and water exchanges. So there are a lot of things that we're going to need to work on. I think they've been pretty successful in the last 2 minutes. So I think hopefully we'll be informed by that experience and be able to carry over some of those similar provisions into a new minute. But to follow up on what Nick mentioned earlier, what gives me hope? I think we all see the benefit of cooperation rather than conflict and certainty rather than uncertainty. And I think those are really powerful motivators that give me hope that we can reach an agreement with Mexico and hopefully a domestic agreement as well.
Thank you, Sally. And I'm going to go right back to you and go back around the other way with the second question, which is there's 4 competing proposals on the table. Which makes the most sense to you? You may not be able to comment on that one, but what are the obstacles that are going to be overcome to reach that agreement? So kind of take the half empty side of the cup now and see what we need to work on.
So the one that makes the most sense right now is the one that doesn't exist right now. And that is the Basin States Consensus Agreement. And that's why it's so important for those negotiators from the upper and lower basin states to come together and have at least the concepts of an alternative by the November 11th deadline that Reclamation has given to them, because that's going to be our best chance to avoid litigation. So what is the obstacle to overcome? I mean, if you have somebody who's really unhappy and there's no consensus, I think people are going to start talking to their lawyers pretty quickly. And that, I think, is a big concern, because I think the notion that a court could come in and have some sort of an injunction that prevents Reclamation, Department of the Interior from taking action would mean that we would have a system with great uncertainty about how it would be operated, and a possibility that Reclamation would not legally be able to take the steps that it would need to take to protect the system. So that's, I think, a big concern. So what are obstacles that we might have to overcome with Mexico? You know, the notion of taking reductions on a recurring basis as opposed to the existing agreements. And I think, you know, most of the alternatives that out there kind of have bigger reductions earlier than what has been the case over the last 15 or 20 years. My sense is that Mexico has a different sense of risk than we do in the United States. We might be a little bit more risk averse. So negotiating with Mexico on having Mexico participate more proactively in taking shortages is something that we'll have to work on and come up with an equitable arrangement about. And we also need to demonstrate the reductions are due to natural causes rather than human caused factors, right? We need to show that we have been responsible in our management of the Colorado River system, and that it is due to factors of climate and not our decision to use more water or waste water. And that will make a compelling argument, I think, for Mexico to participate in the agreement. You know, but I think it's really important in terms of, you know, what makes the most sense. It needs to be something that's effective. It needs to be something that's implementable, and it needs to be something that avoids litigation.
Thank you, Stephanie. Carlos, obstacles. What do you see, and what if any of the four existing proposals make sense from your seat?
Thank you. So I'm going to side with Sally. The option that's probably makes more sense is the one that hasn't been developed yet. The one option that I would hope prevails is one that looks at the whole system in general, not just a suboptimal system that focuses on one area or one item within the whole agenda of negotiation. And if I can introduce something that would be a different dichotomy, like partnership and parochialism, I would introduce one that would talk about commitments versus mechanisms. Mechanisms are commitments. I mean, commitments are promises to comply from one side of the border and the other side of the border, or from parties within the agreement. Mechanisms are a bridge so that parties can work together towards a goal. And I will give you an example of what I'm thinking about. And again, Carl, underscoring what you said, I do not speak for Mexico. I'm just taking what I know from Mexico and putting it out there to see how the reaction would be. A commitment is something that within an agreement needs to be enforced immediately. A mechanism is an agreement for parties to work together over the course of time, like a time release capsule. If Mexico is to actually begin to repair all the areas of opportunity that would improve water management, it's going to need time. It's going to need time to begin to modernize agriculture, which takes up 75% to 80% of the water in Mexico. It's going to need time for the culture of agriculture in the Mexicali Valley to change and to move in a different direction. It's going to take time to introduce, for instance, regenerative agriculture that would improve soil quality, reduce water demand, water consumption. And all of that, of course, is also going to need investment. And the mechanisms that can be agreed upon between both parties and even multiple parties, Mexico with California or with Arizona and so forth through the International Boundary Water Commission, also will take time. And so that I think would be something that makes more sense. Of course, of the five options that are out there, I would, if I were to endorse, one of them would be probably the conservation, cooperative conservation alternative, because it has a lot of mechanisms. It of course really focuses or gives emphasis on the environmental aspect of it, but I like the idea that mechanisms are something that we need to focus on more than just commitments.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting perspective on that. Jordan.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Sally as well. It's not what's on the table already. And I still believe, I do have hope. And I think it's just, as I've been to, as part of some of the meetings prior to my leaving office, it just seems like the states, tribes, the organizations, it's like a poker game. They don't want to show their hand yet. But it's time to show their hand, because we have to come to some type of solution and resolution. And at the end of the day, I've said this many times before, everybody's not going to be happy. But what is fair? What is fair about across the board? What may work in the upper basin may not work in the lower basin, but at least give each other an opportunity to explain what has worked and what has been successful. And when we put our egos and leave them at the door and we strategize, we'll show you what maybe we could work with. It's not 100%. I think we can move, but it just seems like everyone is just holding their cards, not looking, not wanting anyone to see it. But time is of the essence. And I think we just have to come to an agreement. I don't want the courts to come in and step in and say, this is what, because for my tribe, we already have Supreme Court rights. And so that was a big victory for my tribe years ago. And as a young 18-year-old sitting in the tribal chambers, and I remember my former tribal leaders always said, never, ever give up our water. Never. And like Tina said, ID, Imperial County, same thing. And I'm sure a lot of states feel the same way. But I was always going to all these meetings as a youngster. And when I became a council member and the president, I seen a lot of our elders, heard a lot of our elders tell us, water is precious, water is life. And without water, we are nothing. And that's what it means to the tribes. I know it means the same thing for the states, but we have to come, sit at the table, leave our egos aside. What's going to work? What can work? What cannot work? I mean, like Tina says, it's just at times I get so frustrated because for sometimes it's a 3-hour drive for me, and it's just like I drove for 3 hours just to hear nothing again. But come up with something. We have to do it. We have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Tina, you talked about the negotiations being stalled. You directly came out and said it. It must be there must be an obstacle there that, and then again, what are the perspectives? Which of the options do you think is possible? Or
So the options you're referring to are from the alternatives report that was frankly from the last administration. I do think we've progressed on. We do have some new leadership with the new administration coming in. The Bureau of Reclamation has some high level appointees that are directly involved now. Before, Reclamation had been sort of leaving the states alone to work things out. I think it very much helps to have the taskmaster there. And I speak a little bit from experience. In 2003, we would have never had a QSA if someone wouldn't have been, a gun to our head and twisting our arm and convincing us that partnerships and collaboration are the only way forward, because litigation can last forever.
and that was the federal government, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of friends in our collaboration, and it wasn't collaboration at the time, but it's funny, our enemies from 30 years ago are our frenemies now, because we have these ongoing partnerships and we work together And it's a necessary evil, but we all make it work, and we all have great respect for the agencies and the perspectives of those communities we represent, because you can't forget about the water users and the purposes of that water. Agriculture is often a target. People love us when there's a food shortage, and then when there's a water supply shortage, you hear a lot about how much water ag uses. That's one of my pet peeves, because you all like to eat. So every drop of water that goes to agriculture works its way back into the cities through the grocery stores and through the various commodities you eat. These days, people are picking on alfalfa again, but alfalfa is in your steak, it is in your pizza, it's in your ice cream. It's trickling through ways you can't understand if you don't have a farming background or look beyond the grocery store. So I do think that there are opportunities moving forward. Honestly, I think our biggest challenge now is the clock and the hydrology, because the reservoirs aren't in a condition where we can talk about how we ramp up to something. If we don't have a decent water supply this winter, we're back in crisis mode of, we need not only the existing reductions that are being proposed in the lower basin, but possibly more. And it's really hard to, dive in headfirst to something when you'd rather, work your way into the deep waters. So I do think that we have these challenges. We're working against a clock right now. At the end of the day, the federal government will take an action. Our experience is it's better off to be involved in that decision making and what those actions may look like. They may not be ideal actions. It may be we need some near-term patches and fixes to get to a larger agreement. And so I'm very hopeful we can get through this. The lower basin has been very aggressive and purposeful. We have a proposal on the table to make reductions of about 1.25 million acre feet. Our experience with Mexico is that they have great partnership opportunities. They've always been there under shortages, but the United States needs to come up with a plan first. They're not going to go first, and they shouldn't. We need to see how we can take these existing partnerships, leverage them, maximize them. And I think California is in a good place. We've done this for 30 years. We have collaboration, we have partnerships, we have large scale conservation programs. We know how to make things work once we get the agreements executed. But that's a little bit of a challenge with elected boards and with everybody trying to protect their interests. And there's nothing like a crisis to help you make decisions quicker. But I really don't want a court to tell me how to manage water, because that person probably went to law school and doesn't have a natural resources background. Nothing against lawyers, but that's not how you manage it.
So is a key obstacle what Jordan said, that the negotiations are stalled because people aren't holding, playing their cards yet or showing their cards yet? Is that the key obstacle behind it, or is it something else?
I don't want to be too specific. Like I said earlier, the good news is 2 years ago, we had a proposal that was 6 states versus California. And now we have a solid lower basin partnership on developing conservation and reductions that total 1.2 million acre feet, maybe more potentially. The federal government has been very good about saying, you guys come up with a deal, we will help you with resources. What those may be, we don't know. We've had a good start with the congressional funding that was made available a couple of years ago. We know that the federal government prints money, but probably not enough for everybody to be happy. But we know they can help encourage things along.
Thank you. I think it's interesting to note, as you see even when I tried to give them the half empty bill, they're looking positively. They're looking in the right direction. But now we're going to go to the half empty guy.
I'm prepared, Carl. So, yeah, I can't say I disagree with anything that anyone has said here, but just perhaps for a different perspective. And this is not necessarily a San Diego perspective. It's just something for all of us to think about as San Diegans and as Californians. We've all gone through this marriage counseling, right, over the past couple of years on Colorado River issues. There is an alternative on the table that has parallel to a breakup, a conscious decoupling, if you will. The map that you see on the screen here, as Carl noted, that's a political boundary. That's an operational boundary. You know, if some of our partners won't change their evil ways, it may be time to start thinking about the world differently in that regard. And I say that coming from a perspective of what we have done as Californians and what we have done as San Diegans. The investment that we have made here locally and the investment and how that plays out in the Colorado River Basin is substantial. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that we have between San Diego and the Imperial Valley. Our two communities are absolutely connected right now. The 60% of the water that Chair Serrano mentioned that this region receives is because of the hard work and the investment that growers made in the Imperial Valley. Your water bills are a reflection of that. No matter where you live in San Diego, your water bills are a reflection of that. There are communities in the Upper Basin, and there are communities in the Lower Basin, in Arizona and Nevada, who haven't quite made that investment. And arguably, what we all say under our breath as we sit around the table in these negotiations is it's time for some of these communities to make the investments that we have made in Southern California. They have yet to recognize in the form that we have this nexus between water and wastewater. We have the water conservation transfer from the Imperial Valley. It is with us for 45, 75, 110 years. We also have water coming online locally. Our community continues to invest in new water supply development. That's something that we can't leave on the table. We can't continue to give more, if you will, at the altar. We have to be cognizant of that. And this is something that the Upper Basin and other parties will not recognize. And we continue to ask more of San Diegans and Californians. So that's just a different perspective as to why things might not work out and why a conscious decoupling could be something that allows us to take our side of the house, if you will, and manage our future accordingly.
No, it's a little foggy to me. So, but maybe you can hang for a minute. Talk about the difference between the upper and lower. Where's the real, you know, the fish in the giddy up there that needs to be addressed? It's fuzzy, at least to me. Maybe it is to some in the audience too.
I mean, and Tina, feel free to jump in here, but I mean, the West was developed before the Upper Basin, right? First in place, first in use. You know, that's where the water rights come from. The West is developed. The urban coast is developed in a way that can't be compared to the Upper Basin in many ways. Of course, you have major metropolitan areas, but it pales in comparison to what we have here in California, both in terms of urban development and agricultural water use and productivity. Those two things cannot be ignored. And so we are using our water, and we are using our water efficiently. Per capita water use in this region has gone down over time when population has increased. However, the development has not occurred in other parts. But they have an allocation of water, and they want to hold on to that water. And that's a noble cause, right? I think that anyone in this room, if you're sitting in Denver, you are saying and acting the same way. But there has to be a concession in terms of holding back that water for communities, San Diego, Imperial, California in general, who are making those investments already and continue to make those investments despite the dire straits that we're in.
Thank you. Do you want to add something further to that?
And I think the Upper Basin doesn't have the understanding of that. They're fearful of not being able to grow into their full entitlement. And their mantra is, well, you guys are using too much. We have grown into our entitlement, and we've had to learn how to manage growth and development using conservation. And it's very doable. 20 years ago, you planned you needed more in the future. What we've learned now is you can take those existing supplies, you can reuse them, you can partner with other agencies, and you can still maximize growth without increasing your water use. I don't think there's an understanding of that as much in the Upper Basin. I also know Dan mentioned the ag productivity. We farm 365 days a year. It's a little slow on Christmas, but other than that, I mean, we can get 7, 8, 9 cuttings of alfalfa. In the Upper Basin, it's a very limited season, and it's much more local. They have more riparian rights. they have the ability to do hard things. We've actually learned a lot about the Upper Basin over the last couple of years when they say they can't do things. And we sit down with them, not as a group, but one-on-one with the states individually. They have regulatory authorities, but it's a lot easier for them to go tell Farmer Joe to close his gate because Farmer Sam upstream has more senior water rights and he needs water and there's not flow in the river than it is to go close that gate so that California can get more water. And that's how they sort of view it is, well, California just wants more water. We don't want more water. We want the water that we're legally entitled to. We're willing to share in the challenges ahead. We have a head start. We can help you, but you have to have that willingness. And politically, I think that's a challenge for them because they haven't had that pressure. They also have a different perspective of the Bureau of Reclamation. In the lower basin, the Secretary serves as the water master, but because they haven't reached the full development in the upper basin, they sort of self-manage. So they're really sticking together. And we talked about the divorce. One of the more recent proposals on the table is a natural flow based regime, which we wouldn't worry about reservoir elevations. Upper basin would do upper basin, lower basin would do lower basin. We would protect Lake Mead, they would protect Lake Powell, but they take their water supplies off a river. They don't draw from a reservoir. And the whole purpose of Powell was to provide the long-term flows for the lower basin. And their ability to protect that system is not the same type of protection for Lake Mead. We protect Lake Mead because absent that, we have no water.
In short, the requirement for water to come down from the upper to lower, can you describe that in just a couple sentences?
So the compact requires them to send 7.5 million acre feet down on an annual basis with a 10-year rolling average plus half of the Mexico delivery. And that is sort of the glitch. We are about to probably next year drop below that threshold. And then the question is, does the lower basin go to court and say, compact call, they're not delivering the necessary amounts? The upper basin has some new legal perspectives about that and about what the forefathers had in mind when they signed those agreements.
So in simple, they can say, they hold the gate at Glen Canyon Dam and at Powell. And so that's where the real dispute is to how that works in simple terms.
Yeah, and reclamation controls the gate, but they're not going to interpret what the compact decision is unless the judge tells them to. They're a little hesitant on that.
So, while you have the mic, I don't want to leave the environment out of this discussion, as you might imagine, those that know me. Talk a little bit of the Salton Sea and what the negotiations might mean to the Salton Sea, which is, been losing water over the years anyway.
The Salton Sea is our rock and a hard place. So our water flows through our community. About 97% is used by ag, but our return flows from agriculture make their way north to the Salton Sea. Essentially, it's a drainage basin for our community, but it has turned into an environmental resource and a flyway critical point because it's a large body of water in Southern California, and all of the urban development elsewhere has sort of gotten, we've lost a lot of the wetlands that now, Salton Sea isn't a place where a bird would say, hey, that's where I want a vacation. But in the absence of a better wetlands, it's a pretty darn good environment. Unfortunately, it's a closed basin. And so you couple heat with limited water supplies and 6 feet of evaporation a year. And it historically has become increasingly saline to the point where the fish can't reproduce anymore. And that's the restaurant for the birds. So that's how you better understand how valuable that resource is. Our conservation programs, the linchpin in our willingness 20 years ago to enter into these transfer agreements was the Salton Sea, and our community could not mitigate those impacts on its own. If folks were going to benefit from the water, then they needed to contribute to coming up with restoration alternatives at the sea, so that not only did the ecosystem not decline further than it had to, but so that we who live there don't have a public health disaster when you have 75,000 acres of new land exposed that used to be underwater, that potentially you have air quality problems. The state of California stepped up in that. They've implemented a restoration agreement, but that's the challenge. As we get more efficient, there will be less water to the sea. The other challenge is the only reason the sea gets water is because of the Colorado River. So we cannot let the Colorado River crash because if the water doesn't flow through our farms and our fields, the Salton Sea gets no water either. And so it is really a conundrum. The good news is the state of California has stepped up. They've got some amazing projects that they're building down there. Reclamation stepped up 3 years ago and provided $250 million to supplement the state's activities and help the sea so that we could do additional conservation to help the river.
So essentially, if significant conservation is required to try to help meet the, whatever the negotiations come up with at the end, that just by simple math means there's gonna be less water to the Salton Sea.
And alternatively, if the Colorado River crashes, there's no water to the
there's no
Salton
water.
Sea. So, we're hitting our maximum point on conservation. At a certain point, you can only become so efficient, and then it's fallowing. And that's an F word for my community. Fallowing means not only do you not eat and have food choices and food safety in this country, there's people not working. And so we're very adamant that the cities focus on their conservation activities, the turf replacement. If I'm going to fallow a field, then you all need to get rocks in your gardens, because it's more important to eat and it's more important to make sure that our communities thrive as well.
Thank you. Quick note, we're gonna run the dialogue until about a quarter of, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. I don't want to leave the environmental topic by. Carlos, you mentioned the river used to flow to the sea, and how can that happen given the current requirements and the river, and how can innovation, is there a nexus between the innovation you described and that potentially happening?
Yeah, so Tina hits on one of the issues that I think is important to consider, the birds. What we're doing on the Mexican side in terms of restoring and reconnecting the sea, and when I say what we're doing, I don't mean my team or Mexico. I mean the whole collaboration of the Colorado River, which includes the Bureau of Reclamation, includes the International Boundary and Water Commission, and the 7 basin states. I've been really surprised to see how increasingly in the bilateral conversations, the environment becomes an item that is supported by everyone here. And over the course of 13 years since Minute 319, I think that one of the issues that we've used to emphasize what we're doing in terms of the environment is, of course, realizing climate change is a factor. Climate change is a factor in terms of how it's changed the behavior of the Colorado River. Not only are we dealing with levels that are unprecedented in the history, but we're also dealing with with an ecology, with a physical environment that is no longer the same that it was when the 1922 Colorado River Compact was signed, or when the 1944 treaty was signed. And I mean, in that respect, I think that just keeping the package together in terms of how we can reconnect the water to the sea, we can reconnect the river, excuse me, to the sea, and we can increase the 1,500 acres of wetlands that have already been restored on the south side of the border to the point of 4,000 acres that is the target that the NGO community, the binational NGO community have established. And making sure that this is somehow begins to connect with how farming is being done in the irrigation district. And we also have native Mexican American communities, the Cucapah Nation on the south side of the border, which are also wanting to have water flow to the river. And so we put all of this together, and we are looking to see if we can have what on the Mexican side would be known as a biocultural region that engulfs practice regenerative agricultural practices on the irrigation district, water for the Cucapah Nation, water for cities. This can be done. This can be done. Number-wise, this can be done. And it will not be just the benefit to the Mexican side. It's to the benefit of newer generations that are coming around and understanding that climate change is not going to stop unless we begin to do something about it. And it would also impact on the north side of the border.
Yeah, I remember you told me in our phone conversation that we can't even predict what the river is going to do anymore, that it's the climate conditions have changed so much, the ground absorbing the water that used to run off and all of those pieces, that it's actually a different animal now than we were used to. I would like each of you in one or two sentences, if you can, just run quickly by what has from your perspective, what has Mexico done to contribute to keeping the levels up? I know all of you have done something. I'll exempt Sally from that unless she has one, but let's start with Carlos. Just run down the table in one sentence or two. What kind of contributions has Mexico made to keeping mead levels up?
So for starters, as I said, Mexico needed to do some sort of a mind shift, to stop looking at the Colorado River as a faucet, as a reliable faucet that would deliver 1.5 million acre feet, and begin to work with it. It's been a hard haul. Politics on the US side is in the middle of discussions. There are also politics on the Mexican side. There are farmers there for over the course of 80 years that did not understand what shortage meant. It was the only irrigation district in Mexico that would reliably get 100% of its allocation. It's now
Carlos,
changing.
I don't mean to step on you, but we're getting
No.
short on time, and
Yes.
I know Mexico has
So-
made some contributions that kept lead up. I'm kind of understanding what those contributions
So
were.
the minimal contributions that Mexico has done to store water in Lake Mead is just the start. And I think what I wanted to say is the process is moving in that direction, even though the results don't show it yet.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, I know you've talked about, I know you have a relationship with MWD and others, and where your excess water has been helpful to the situation. Can you give us a concise, short version of that?
Yes, so a couple of years ago with the Congress, they passed a bill, the Infrastructure Act, I can't think of the name of it right now, off the top of my head. But we have an agreement with Metropolitan Water District and a partnership. And so we went back to Metropolitan Water District, says, you know what we're getting, what the Department of Interior is gonna be offering us is gonna be a lot more. Can we forbear our water agreement for a couple of years? Because of the strong partnership we had, they agreed, and so we store up, I believe it's close to 30,000 million acre feet of water into Lake Mead, and that's what the tribe is doing. And we're also conserving a lot of our water as well, working with our sister tribes as well. And so we're making the contributions to to fill up Lake Mead. I wish we would, but that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Jordan. Tina, in short, I know you've done a lot and it's a long story, but in short, the kind of contributions that ID has made to the needs,
So
the
since-
shortage.
Since 2003, ID's conserved over 9 million acre feet, so that's more than the run of the river for a year plus some. Last year, we conserved almost 675,000 acre feet. We have ongoing conservation programs, not only with the Water Authority, with Coachella, with Metropolitan. We have a binational nexus. We funded some projects in Mexico to allow their farmers to be innovative. And we do a lot of touring of folks from around the basin to say, here's what we can do. You can do more too. Our most recent conservation program is in addition to our on-farm efficiency program. We're running a deficit irrigation program where we provide growers alternative financing to not grow a crop for 45 to 65 days on alfalfa, klein grass, or Bermuda grass. And those crops essentially, they lose yield, they lose cuttings, but the farmers can nurse them back to health when the summer's over and re-irrigate them and bring them back in production.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me, over the past, our thematically, we've been about augmentation and creativity, and the programs that Tina mentioned, certainly the Water Authority has been a part of that, but at least over the past 2 years, that theme has kind of stuck somewhat. And I think that when we look at creativity, we should look beyond just the basin on the screen here. We need to look at all of California. And over the past 2 years, we've had water come down from the State Water Project that has allowed San Diego to take that water in cooperation with Metropolitan and IID and leave some of our Colorado River water behind Lake Mead. 2 consecutive years of that with the addition of some federal funding and environmental coverage that was already obtained. We were able to put 100,000 acre feet worth of water behind the dam in Lake Mead. That kind of thinking, looking just beyond the basin and beyond your own community, I think is what we look to do going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dan. Sally?
Well, I'll just follow up on Mexico's participation and
Please.
what they've done under our existing agreements. Mexico has conserved hundreds of thousands of acre feet under the agreements that we have, and it actually going even back to 318, 319, 323, and then we have 330, which we signed about a year and a half ago for them to do an additional 400,000 acre feet over the period of 2024, 2025, and 2026. And what that means, because shortages are triggered by certain elevations in Lake Mead. So just as all the things that you are doing have contributed to elevated elevations in Mead, Mexico has contributed, like maybe 2 or 3 feet to that as well. And so that's benefited the system overall and kept us above some of those really lower, more critical thresholds.
Yeah, that's great. It's really, really interesting to think about the Lake Mead and think about the contributions in terms of feet of elevation. It's a lot of water every foot. And so these contributions, when you raise it a couple feet are a big deal. We're going to jump to some questions now. There's a couple of them on seawater desalination. I'm going to try to make this one short. We got a shrinking salton sea. Could we develop a integrated approach where desal systems transfer hypersaline brine waste to help restore the salton sea, et cetera? So anybody have some thoughts on desal?
Does anyone have a desal plant panel besides me? Look, I think that those ideas, good economists, good engineers, good lawyers, they can come up with just about anything. Politically, something like that happening is probably a non-starter for most. I believe it can happen, but I think it's just unrealistic at this point to think that we are going to build a transmission pipeline from the sea to the Salton Sea or the Imperial Valley. There's been many conversations over the years about things like that happening, a bidirectional pipeline, for instance, but they never quite got off the ground.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's one. Last year in Bogota, Colombia, where I just was, a city of 8 million had a drought and began a process of a 1-day water shutoff per week, rotating by neighborhoods. How far are we away from the similar if we don't have enough water?
Well, I'll start from a San Diego's perspective. We are fine, and I will live by that statement for a very long time. The way that things are working right now, our demands here locally have dropped off quite a bit, and because of that and the supply situation that we're in a position where we have the ability to potentially exchange water with other parties through the IID transfer. So, this is something that we invested in the 90s in partnership with the Imperial Valley. If you go back 3 years, there are portions of Los Angeles and Orange County that were on 1 day a week watering, state water project dependent areas. You didn't hear about that here in San Diego. You didn't see those headlines in the UT and the Voice of San Diego because of the investments we made. So that's not a situation for us here locally.
Yeah. I want to toss in something right now. In 1990, I mentioned that drought earlier. I did a consensus project between the Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District, and we tried to estimate what the water use was going to be in 2010, I think it was. It was 900,000 acre feet a year. Dan, what's our use this last year? 400 and something?
Yeah, you're in the 400s. And think so.
Incredible.
Let me add on to that. When we first started talking about a transfer out of the Imperial Valley, we were at 500,000 acre feet. Can you imagine what that would have been today? We ended up at 200,000. So yeah, the past 30 years are no indication of the future.
Yeah, it goes unrecognized the amount of change that we've actually been able to accomplish. Here's another one. At what point will we need to more strictly regulate water usage for corporations and individuals, and what would this look like? And how will this current administration affect this issue with the shrinkage of agencies like the AEPA and the Council on Environmental Quality, excuse me.
Well, yeah.
Maybe the first part.
We have a lot of water here in San Diego, and that's an envious position to be in for many. I don't foresee us restricting water use in any form to corporations. And in fact, I think that if we really wanted to continue with the San Diego entrepreneurial spirit, we'd be doing things here to bring businesses in to use water, AI data centers, for instance. I think that those are some things that we could and should be looking at down the line here for San Diego.
And I don't think regulation is ever the key to solving a problem. It's better to allow for that innovation. That's what we're looking at. That the new administration is trying to lessen some of the environmental, the NEPA process. In California, it doesn't really matter because we have CEQA, so I don't know that that's really going to speed things up. But we have to be careful. We don't just want to make environmental problems go away and not analyze them and ignore them. We need to acknowledge them still. So, you know, maybe we provide more flexibility as to how you can get permits and the mitigation for some of these projects. But I think the key is really innovation and not somebody telling you how to do things, because it is not well received, and then people will go to court and fight it.
Can I just add something?
Absolutely. And also how much do you want, when you do after you do that, how much water does Tijuana get from the Colorado River? That's a question I have here,
Oh, yeah.
which kind of
great.
related.
Sure. Can I speak in cubic meters and million cubic meters? That would be 100 million cubic meters a year. No, 80,000 acre feet, 80,000 acre feet of water, besides the wells that are there. Yesterday was a panel in Tijuana. Some of you were there, and they talked about also about 1 day of the week without water in Tijuana and Ensenada. And the one of the panelists mentioned that 1 week without water would really drive the consciousness of folks and begin to somehow conserve water. But that's a scenario that we don't want. And that's the scenario that I think Dan is saying it's not present in San Diego. We don't want it. I agree with you. That's not what we want. There's also history of a brewery trying to settle in Mexicali and being run away because of lack of leadership and governance. And I think that I just talking and beginning to preview what to forecast how and project how we want to manage water is a much better scenario, and that's I think what we want. The 80,000 acre feet is right now the water coming from the irrigation district, aside from allocations that are already, and of course the state of Baja California is starting the planning of a desalinization plant, which is yet to be built.
Thank you, Carlos. I want to jump back to Jordan. Question for me, not from the audience. The tribal nations have a long history in water demand, and in some ways the shortest role in decisions about supply and demand. How will the strengthening positive influence of the tribes in Colorado River affairs affect the negotiations, and what are the expectations from your perspective?
I think with the tribes, there's a chairman, as a matter of fact, still chairman. He was always wanting to be at the table. The tribes need to be at the table. So they put him on the table. Well, it wasn't at the table for the decision we're making, it was at the back table. But now he was fortunate to be put on a panel, and he says, now I feel I'm part of something, part of the team to be at the table. So, like I said, that our tribe, Cochon tribe, has senior water rights, Supreme Court victory that we celebrate every year, and along with 5 other tribes along the Colorado River. So, but we don't throw that into other tribes' face, because there are other tribes in the basin, upper and lower basin, who do not have water rights. They don't have water going to the reservation. 2025, they have no water going to the reservation. And so as the water decay, as the water keep decreasing, I think about those tribes, and we, as a tribal nation, has always, what can we do for you guys? Some of it's in the upper basin, so we don't have a say-so in Colorado, but we could just tell the tribes, this is what we've done. This is the story about us. And so tribes have to band together and just say, okay, as long as we're at the table, we're part of the decision, we can make it happen. And now that the tribes are at the table, uh, there's more stronger voices for the upper and lower basins, which is great. But kind of getting outside Carl, but anyway, uh, with the tribes at the table, I think some states, I don't want to do it. Some states don't believe the tribes really have a say so, but the lower basin has proven to us is that we're at the table, we're ready to negotiate, not to give up everything, fair across the board for everyone, fair across the board for a living river, which we all need. And so, tribes have, we had our own tribal meeting a couple of years ago, tribes only, and we basically said the same thing. We band together, we help each other out, because that's what sister tribes do. And that's what the states should do. These 7 states should just look at each other and say, we're brothers and sisters in this. It's like you heard earlier, divorce. You know, it's just like partnership. Some feel that word partnership is not a good word. But it is, because if we think about our own family. We have a member of our family, you know, who we may not get along with, but their family. And I think the partnership is needs to be more focused on, because the partnership does work. It has worked for our tribe, and it has worked for other tribes. And I think if we just sit at the table again and just roll up our sleeves, time of the essence, the time is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Are you the facilitator for these negotiations? I think you could be. Here's a question kind of off, going a different direction. Could the systematic use of nature-based solutions, this is a little bit of what Carlos was talking about, throughout the watershed to improve water management be incorporated into the agreements?
So the agreements themselves are very operational. It's how you manage flow releases, and, they get down to the level of shortage, when, and who. What really matters is the implementing agreements that will then make those work, that will happen within the agencies, within the state, and how those work. I think there's opportunities. I think one of the things we've learned, particularly in the upper basin, is the forest management and the wildfire issues are probably a big factor in some of the hydrology challenges we face today. We had a 92% snowpack last year, but only a 43% inflow. So that's a problem if that water isn't making it into the system. So I think we have to look much broader than just the water agencies that use the water to these longer term solutions.
Okay, thank you. Carlos, is that you want to say on that?
Yeah, just to add, exactly, all of the agreements have been focused on water demand and water supply. I mean, a dear friend passed away, former Commissioner Roberto Salmon used to say, we need to also look at the basin's water factories, along the lines of what Tino was just mentioning.
Okay, thank you. Question back for Dan. I think you've really answered this, but can you talk about investments that San Diego's made to give the region more water, and elaborate how the agreements with IID have affect San Diego County's water rates and our water bills?
Yeah, so, the agreements that I've been kind of referencing here with the Imperial Valley, the really high level view of what that is that through water conservation efforts in the valley, on farm water conservation, not fouling, as Tina alluded to, that water is conserved. It's left in the river, and the water authority, this community, pays a price for that. It's a negotiated price. It's a long-term agreement. The Imperial Valley, or the district, then pays farmers to continue to be more efficient with their water use, do different things, respond to different market conditions with their water use. What has that meant for San Diego? So back in 2003, almost overnight, we doubled the price of what we paid for imported water. Imported water is the operative word here. We're at the end of the pipe, literally, figuratively. We have no groundwater resources. So everything that we get here is imported, and there's a cost associated with that. There's a cost that we pay the Imperial Irrigation District, and there's a cost that we pay the Metropolitan Water District to get the water here. When I say overnight we double paid for that certainty. It's that certainty that we have today, and it's the certainty that's continuing in the future for this economy. We doubled down on that certainty with the Colorado Basin plant that took place in 2012. And during the droughts of 2014, it was that plant, in addition to the water conservation from the valley, that let San Diego, let this region go from what was a mandatory 15% cutback from the state and from metropolitan down to only a 1% cutback. So that's the supply reliability that you all paid for as part of your water bills. Now there's a cost associated with that. Leading up into where we are today, population growth continued, demands were steady. Carl, you mentioned this, the demands of 30 years ago are not the demands of today. And so now we're in a situation where we have what we call in the industry take or pay contracts. It's water that we are going to get regardless. We have to pay for it. That's a reflection on your water bill. In a business sense, that's a fixed cost that you have to deal with. And so what we're trying to do is rebalance that resource mix that we have here locally, so as to carve out a piece of that water, do things differently with how it is reflected in our rate structure, and potentially move it somewhere else as an effort to lower costs here in San Diego as it relates to all of your water bills.
Thanks, Dan. Tina, water conservation of IID has been enabled by water transfer funds and federal money. What happens when federal money runs out, and why not raise the price of water to spur efficiency?
So the challenge with implementing our programs is we don't just build a plant and then operate and maintain it on an annual basis for the next 30 years. We have farmers implementing every crop, every field choice they make, and then they have to figure it out when they plant the next crop, whether that's through sprinkler systems, tailwater return systems, precision land leveling. They're active everyday conservation measures that they have to take place. Our board made business decisions to use transfer revenues to help mitigate the impacts on the farming community by asking them to step up and voluntarily conserve, and they kept the water rates low. We have a new board that is trying to move forward. We will be going through a cost of service study next year. We have Prop 218 to deal with. So it's going to be challenging to implement water rate increases, but that is what our new board is committed to doing moving forward to free up more of the San Diego funding to be more aggressive on the conservation efforts. So we fully anticipate that our rates will increase. We also have the luxury of pretty cheap water delivery service. We don't have to treat our water. We deliver raw water. It's a gravity flow system, so there's not big electricity costs or pumping. Our system's 125 years old. We sort of brute strength it together. And it's pretty amazing that there's 3,000 miles of open channel canals and drains that feed this water through gravity flow. So it's very cost effective to deliver, unlike having to get that water through metropolitan system, through treatment factors, and then back down into San Diego. We ship it through a canal, gravity takes place. Our cost of service is probably about $60 an acre foot. So the board will be looking to make that transition. It will be a slow transition because the farmers can't immediately accommodate. But then we will then turn around and make that funding directly available to them to supplement their conservation payments to increase this technology.
Good, thank you. I'm gonna go back to Sally. I'm gonna ramble this question, so see what you can make of it for me. This one's back to me again. You talked about waiting to the US side to kind of finish their negotiations. How does waiting affect what has to happen when the bilateral piece of it with the Mexico and the US come together, and how are the negotiations with Mexico different from the domestic negotiations? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so, I would say that we are concerned about the condensed timeline that we will have to undertake this negotiation. I mean, it took us about 2.5 years to negotiate the last minute. So we're probably, we'll be looking at, less than a year probably to negotiate this one. I'm hopeful because we already have agreements that have worked pretty well under the existing minute that we won't need to start from scratch on some aspects of the minute. Like I said, I mentioned we have things on, investment and projects and salinity and operational issues, et cetera. But in Mexico, water rights are federal, and in the United States, they're managed by the states. And so that creates a difference. And we've really worked with Mexico, the Mexican section of the International Boundary and Water Commission, a lot over the years. So now they understand that. They welcome the participation of our basin states. people at the meetings because, you know, they used to come to us and say, we'd say, well, we don't know if we can do that because we need to talk to California, or we need to talk to Arizona, or we need to talk to Texas for some of our Rio Grande issues. And they were like, well, you're the federal government. Why can't you just do that? Well, because we have a different system here. So that's one of the challenges that I think we've largely overcome. But you know, there are also just other challenges, logistical challenges. Crossing the border to have a meeting can be a big hassle. You need to have interpretation because you have people speaking in English and Spanish. We saw an example here. How much is 100 million cubic meters in acre feet? Like sometimes we're not even talking the same language. And I'll give you just a funny little anecdote. Years ago, President George W. Bush was in Mexico with Mexican President Fox, and they were talking about a Rio Grande issue. And my agency head, Commissioner John Burnell, gets a call from a White House aide in the middle of this meeting and says, can you tell me how you convert metric to acre feet? Because the presidents are talking and none of us here know, right? So there are issues like that happen. And so those little things kind of just make things a little more complicated, but I think we've been doing this a long time with Mexico. We know how to structure, we've got some good relationships, so I think that'll serve us well.
Okay. We are almost out of time. We probably are out of time, but I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative. I'm going to ask one more question because I think it's important. It came from the audience. What incentives could be offered, or what else can be said or done to convince or entice the upper basin to diversify their supply and minimize reliance on the river? Apple instead of a stick.
I think pressure always helps. And funding always helps. They have challenges. They have, not only do they have to figure out how to conserve water, they have what's called a shepherding problem. The way their water rights work is you can pay a farmer to fallow. He can leave that water in the river, but the next guy could divert it. So they have to figure out mechanisms internally to get that conservation down to a reservoir. But really, they just need a little bit of pressure to start. And I'm hopeful that perhaps some of their congressional representatives can better understand that as much as they're fighting for the home team, the only way to get things done is to come together and to learn from one another about how to make these programs work. So we don't have a choice.
Okay, let's end it on that. We talked about eagles at the table. Thank you, Jordan, for that. I don't know who all those eagles are, but we got 5 eagles here that I wouldn't mind having at the table. So let's give them a great hand for a wonderful. And Mike, do I have to turn this back over? Are we thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something, and hope you come in the next one.